The reason that it's a good place here for albatross, and the place here we call this Pukekura. Pukekura has been a strategic location for Ngaitahu, Kaitahu, Kati Mamoi, Waitaha, the early tribes here, because of its strategic location. If you look out behind you there, you can see as far as 35 miles. So it's an exposed part of the east coast of the South Island. It's really like a finger that sticks 35 kilometres out into the ocean. So it's almost like an island, which means we have marine or ocean type weather out here, so it's very windy. So to answer your question about why the albatross are here, it's because it's exposed and it's very windy. They need wind to get lift to be able to take off from the headland. It is the only albatross colony that's on the mainland or close to an urban occupied area, such as you can see in the background behind me up the harbour is Dunedin City. So it's the only albatross colony that's probably also accessible to most people for that reason. The rest of them, they do nest on land but on offshore islands. So what we have here is the northern royal albatross, and to the south of us, down in the subantarctic islands, we have the southern royal albatross, and all those other albatross species nest on offshore islands.
Okay. Can you speak a little about the history of the center and your job?
Yes. So I am the moth around here, so that's the manager of operations Tidor Head. So Tidor Head is the name that was put on the headland by the Europeans. Prior to that it was known as Pukekura. So Pukekura is a significant parsite for the local Maori that now have villages scattered throughout the harbour. Prior to European settlement, this was the strategic location for Māori. And within the centre there's a po, or a Poutuku Manua, which has the genealogy or the whakapapa of the people of the headland that stood here for 400 years prior to European settlement. So that tells their story, and it depicts the mana of the people of this area. So when you talk about the local Maori, you call them mana whenua. Mana is like honour, so it's talking about the people that have the mana or the honour of looking after this area. The reason that it is important to Māori now and to the other groups that support us is, if you're mana whenua, you have the responsibility of kaitiakitanga, which is guardianship or stewardship for the whenua. So that the whenua is the land and the species that live upon it. And though this area is recognised as the albatross colony, it's actually a wildlife destination. That noise you can hear going on around me at the moment are red-billed gulls. Most people think of gulls as being a problem, stealing things off cafe tables. Here is one of the few breeding sites. We have 800 pairs of red-billed gulls here that breed here on an annual basis, and that's grown over the last few years. And the reason those colonies are doing well here is the Peninsula Trust and the Pukekura Trust, who manage the reserve directly behind me here, undertake predator control on an annual basis, so that's 365 days of the year, and that supports the work of the Department of Conservation, who have the primary responsibility within the albatross reserve for looking after the species here. So even on the neighbouring properties, they now farm visitors rather than sheep predominantly, and they also undertake predator control. So predator control is now staged all the way back to at least Portobello, which is a village off in the background about 9 kilometres away. So the importance of this headland really comes down to the fact that I made earlier about it being a finger that sticks out from the South Island of New Zealand on the east coast out into the ocean, so it acts like an offshore island. So to ensure that we keep the species here, we treat it like an island. So we do the predator control. They're working on a project called the Peninsula Biodiversity Project at the moment, which is eradication of the possum on the Otago Peninsula. And that's all following on from the concept of the Otago Peninsula almost being an island. And we probably don't have to go back that far in history to understand that this was once a shield volcano with there's some islands which you can see about halfway up the harbour. There were rivers running out from those islands in both directions which formed the main part of the harbour, and those used to run out to the sea. So not that far back in our geological history, the Otago Peninsula was an island. So we worked very hard as kaitiaki and as the Department of Conservation and lots of other volunteer groups on the peninsula, such as Yellow-Eyed Penguin Trust, Save the Otago Peninsula, Peninsula Biodiversity Group, Otago Peninsula Trust, all with a conservation or environmental ethic, working towards the same goal of effectively turning the Otago Peninsula back into that island, using the city of Dunedin as that buffer or that traditional predator-proof fence that you would see around most mainland islands. So that brings us all the way back out to the heads here and the importance of that to marine bird species, as well as down here we have marine mammal species that also call Pukekura home.
What is your best memories?
My best memories, my genealogy or my whakapapa has me linked to this place both through my Maori side and my European side. And my European side farmed this area. They broke it in, they came in with some of the first ships, and some of the places behind me, McCartney Hill specifically, is named after my ancestors. Is pretty close to the area that I'm standing here. The last chief to live on this headland, Karatai, I'm a direct descendant of. So my memories of this area are very strong, and I have very strong whakapapa or genealogy links to this headland. And with regard to, I guess, the establishment of New Zealand, the founding document for here is the Treaty of Waitangi, and it was signed by my ancestor Karatai and two other paramount chiefs of the area, Taiaroa and Koroko, just down here in the bay directly behind us. So our links to this area are really through our oral history and through our I guess our whakapapa or our genealogy links to the land, because we see ourselves as part of the land when we go back through our history.
Okay. The future?
The future directly behind me here is this morning you would have seen me coming in with a truckload of native plants which are going back into this reserve here. If you'd been sailing around the harbour here in 1900 and looked up onto the hillsides, from the top of the ridges down to the edges of the harbour were covered in lowland coastal bush. So it's our aspiration that our children's children, when they come here to visit the wildlife, will see them back in that natural habitat. So we've received assistance from the New Zealand Environmental Trust to revegetate this reserve. So over the next 2 weeks we have school groups coming down here. They're going to help plant 6,000 native plants into the reserve, with another 6,000 native plants going into the reserve the following year. And what that means in real terms, I guess, for the blue penguins that occupy this reserve, is they'll be back in that natural habitat that they evolved in, not having to worry so much about avian predators which would like to pick them up out of here during the day. And there's lots of natural predators that evolved eating the smaller species that you find in New Zealand. And I guess the future for this area really depends on human intervention, those coming in with that conservation effort, that long list of conservation groups that work here, continuing to put back what we've changed over the last 200 years.
Okay. We go on Tiri Tiri, and what do you think about this experience? And Albatros, is there bad animals on this peninsula?
There are.
Yes.
So when you talk about Tiri Tiri, I presume you're talking about Tiri Tiri Matinga, which is up north, the reserve that's up
Yes.
there.
Is there the same problem here?
There are. So what introduced predators, what we are dealing with 365 days of the year. So around this reserve here, we have predator traps specifically targeting mustelids. So that's stoats, weasels and ferrets. Also hedgehogs and feral cats. We have a few possums still remaining on the peninsula, but with the work of the biodiversity group eradicating that possum, where we would have had probably 5 resident possums in this area here alone, we're now encountering 1 male coming into the area about every 2 months. So it means with regard to our revegetation, we're noticing significant improvements just from the fact there's no longer introduced browsers in the reserve, taking the tops off all our native plants because they taste better than the introduced thistles and exotic grasses that we're standing amongst at the moment.
Okay. You know how the albatross eats the fish? Like that?
They do. So albatross that located here at this colony, when they're feeding, depending on what stage they're at their chicks, they don't feed directly off the coast here. They fly up and have been recorded travelling as far as the Waitaki, which is just over 200 kilometres to the north of us, and feeding off that area there where the fresh water mixes with the salt water, so it's high in nutrients and proteins, and we also know that there's lots of salmon and other large samoyed species there. And albatross being a large bird like to take large fish, so they'll fly in and they'll scoop fish off the water. They also fish just directly over the horizon here, which is in what we call the Australian current or the Southland current. So that originates coming around the bottom of southern Australia, comes through southern New Zealand by Foveaux Strait, and then comes up the east coast of the South Island. It's full of phytoplankton and nutrients, lots of small fish, octopus, squid, shoaling fish. And of course, if we've got those in such a healthy marine environment, then we have larger fish out there as well, all working their way up the food chain. So that's the area that the little blue penguins from the colony directly behind me travel out to every day. So they'll swim 20 to 25 kilometres every day to get out to that current, and they'll feed in it on the smaller squid and octopus, which the albatross aim for the larger ones. But what happens out there is they also encounter orca, sharks, other marine mammals such as leopard seals, those sort of things, all out in that same current for the same reason, because it is the main food source, I guess, for the local east coast of the South Island, up as far as what we would refer to as the Chatham Rise, where that current turns and heads towards the Chathams. So albatross from here are also recorded flying out to that Chatham Rise, which is just north of the Waitaki, tracking it all the way out as far as the Chatham Islands, feeding there, and then returning here to feed their chicks. So an adult will usually return here every 2 or 3 days, so that allows them to go quite long distances. We've had birds here that have been recorded travelling as far as South America in approximately 9 days, so 9,500 kilometres non-stop in 9 days. So large distances aren't really a problem for albatross, so they tend to head out here to what has become their habitual feeding grounds, which are at least 200 kilometres from here. So we have no, I guess, direct interaction between the little blues in this colony and the albatross colony, which is on the top of the hill. And I say that because it has been recorded that albatross have been seen to eat little blue penguins. So we'd like to think that these ones here are friends, because they don't eat each other.
Okay. Can you speak about a statistic, number of you grow up, or what is the...
Yep, so we are just coming to the end of last season's breeding cycle, and that means that the adults have already left and we have one remaining chick from last season. So last year we started off, I believe, with about 29 nests, of which we had 25 chicks fledged from this colony. So that is, I think, about our second best year that we've ever had. And they go in cycles. Because the albatross breed every second year, because it pretty much takes them a whole year to breed, they then need to go off and recover. We have a different set of adults returning this season. And so far this season, we've already seen 25 new arrivals coming back here. So we know that we're potentially going to have a better breeding season this season than the last. So when a chick takes off from here, it may not touch ground again for 4 to 5 years. So they take it off for the first time and we're not sure what's holding the one up here at the moment. It's either too heavy or too light tend to be the problems. Expect it to take off within the next week or so, and once it does, it'll pretty much head that first flight 9 to 10 days over to South America, and it'll feed off there, and then for the next 3 or 4 years, either in the roaring 40s or up in the 60s latitude where those strong winds that travel around the earth are, they use those just to continuously scoop up fish. And they have what we call a tube nose, so they can take salt water in through their mouths and excrete the salt out through their nostrils. So the local Maori, they have a tuku panel, which is a weaved panel, and in that panel, just to represent the kaitiaki of the area, is a pattern which is called the tears of the albatross, because the salt drips down just beneath their eyes and looks like the salt, I guess, that's left behind when humans cry.
Okay. Sorry, I understand you, but not all the detail. Okay.
Right.
Is there the place? Is it correct for a big colony?
No. Well, in comparison to what you find in offshore islands, this is probably what I call a boutique or a very small colony. It's quite discreet in its scale. So most seasons we would have anywhere between 40 and 60 birds in the colony, not counting the chicks from the previous year. Offshore island colonies are often into the thousands, so complete different scale.
Okay. Tu aurais une idée
Non, là, je crois que c'est pas mal. Hein.
Ouais. You speak very... You say all the things. For the tourists, it is very small window. Okay.
It is.
We can't make more.
We can't make more with regard to timing. We can, and there's things that we're working on to do that. We have a period of the year where the birds are returning to the colony. It's what we refer to as the nest establishment period, where we try to minimise the impacts of humans on the headland. So we control the viewing up there in a different manner during that time and use different parts of the headland. So we're working on having a new observatory on the headland within the next few years that minimises that disturbance. So with the fact that guiding has gone on here for 47 years and started in a little shed behind us, technology's improved in that last half a century. So we're looking to potentially build a completely new observation area on the footprint of the current one that has tinted windows, has double glazing to reduce the noise of the people inside there that's looking out, would reduce the glare off the windows of the birds that are nesting in front of there, because as you can probably see from my forehead, we're just coming into spring, bright sunny days out here because no fog this time of year. There's no significant pollution here, very clear air, so very bright sunlight reflecting off the windows disturbs the birds directly in front of the observation areas. So by improving that, we're going to allow for better viewing during that 6-week period. But what we do now is we promote what we refer to as a unique tour. So we talk about all of the wildlife on the headland. There's so many species here, at least 22 marine bird species that use this headland as their home, including Royal Australian spoonbills, a large cormorant colony, there's spotted shags. So to say that we're limited is probably not the correct way to look at the opportunities that are here. So with the development here also behind me of the little blue penguin viewing operation to support the work of the Pukekura Trust, now has viewing going on here pretty much from lunchtime every day until an hour after the sun sets. So we are still a iconic destination on the Otago Peninsula, and probably the first of the ecotourism operations that will ever set up.
Okay, the last, two things. We see a lot of birds. Les barges, tu sais en anglais?
Liboza.
You know Liboza?
Liboza, no, it's Latin name.
We see a lot of birds with ring.
Yep.
And sometimes 3, 4.
Yep.
Is there scientific here, and is it possible to put on albatross and?
Yep. So Lance Richdale, who was the original scientist or researcher of the area, started banding albatross back in the 30s. So the method that's used here for banding albatross is every juvenile gets a single red band put on one leg, because we never know which juveniles are going to return and in what year they're going to return. So once those juveniles return here, and often when they're 4 or 5 years of age, there are often our guides on the headland or the dock rangers. They're watching out for every new bird that arrives and checking what's hanging on their legs. If they have a single red band on them, because these birds have never been on land since they took off as a juvenile, take off and fly for the first time, they can't walk. So they pretty much crash land into the ground. It takes them 2 or 3 days, I guess, to get a term you might know as land legs, because they've spent 5 years swimming on the ocean, paddling a little bit with these legs, not really knowing what they're for. So they kind of crash land on the headland here. The rangers, they go out and they scoop them up and stick them under their arms. They take those red bands off. They put a metal band on their leg that has a number on it and a code of 2 or 3 different coloured bands on the opposite leg, just so they can identify that individual for the rest of their time here. So we have had birds here such as Grandma have been recorded at least 70 years of age, so carrying those same bands that were put on by Richdale when he started his work in the 30s.
Fernand and me adore the kiwi in the nature. We think we are very near the nature. What do you think about your country about that?
I think we understand that we're in a very unique environment. We have many endemic species here, so lots of species that occur nowhere else in the world. And I guess we are an island archipelago that is spread over a long latitude, so we have subtropical in the north right down to subantarctic in the south, and a good range of avian species, including lots of ground-based avian species such as the only ground parrot. Our top predators such as weka, those types of species are also ground-based, because there were really no mammals here. So we have this really unique, diverse range of species that are here, and I think most New Zealanders appreciate that, and certainly it is now educated through our children. It's probably embedded better into our education system in the last couple of decades than it probably was when I went to school. But certainly myself, I consider myself to be a kaitiaki or a tangatiaki, so that's someone who is responsible for looking after the environment and the species that are here, and I would probably consider myself a generalist. I have an interest in the marine species that occupy the harbour here, I know from stories that were told by my ancestors, the Otago Harbour here had every marine species that was edible in it, and was probably the envy of every other Maori tribe in the South Island prior to European settlement. And then we came in with different types of technology and different ethics, and we probably overused that resource. And then we had a period of whaling and sealing that went on here up until probably the 1840s. So a lot of the larger marine life, or the marine mammals, are still recovering from that period. Just last week we had a whale up here in the middle of the harbour, some the furthest that anyone's recorded it doing. We have had right whales coming into here. This used to be a birthing area or a calving area for the right whale. Exactly the reason that they set up whaling here, because it was the right whale to catch. So we've had now cows and calves back in the harbour here, and that's only been in the last few years. So I think people are appreciating the fact that we can do a lot better from ecotourism and looking after what we have than we can by exploiting it in the way that we would have done historically before. I suppose we either become enlightened or had a better understanding of the conservation effort.
Have you something to say?
I probably need to say what I said to you off camera prior to speaking, which is normally when someone of Maori descent meets someone, they mihi to them. So they tell them where they've come from and what things are important to them in the landscape here, which I think I'll do just in closing, and then you can shuffle things around and edit it into wherever you think it should be. So ka tangata titi, ka tangata kaka, ka tangata hoki, ko hau te hei mori ora. Kia ora koutou, ngā mihi kia koutou. No mai, haere mai, tauti mai. Welcome once, welcome twice, welcome 3 times. Ko auraki te mauka, ko waitaki dawa, ko taki timu te waka. Ko kaitau kati mamoi, waitaha rapawai nā iwi. So in my mihi to you, I mentioned my mountain, which is Auraki or Mount Cook, and I mentioned my awa, or my river, which is the Waitaki. Flows from Mount Cook out into the ocean of Te Tai-Araki-Uru and links us back to this place. I speak of the genealogy, or the whakapapa, that links me to this place. So that is Kati Māmoe, Waitaha, Rapawai, the early people that stood here on this headland. So recorded being here since the 1300s. So prior to European settlement, they walked on this landscape and they named many of the places that are here. I spoke of my ancestral canoe, the Taki Tumu, which the captain of the Taki Tumu was Tamatea Pokai Whenua, and when it was capsized off the Waiaba, he travelled through the South Island and he placed many of the traditional names on the landscape. So Maori, when we speak to someone and introduce ourselves to them, we link ourselves to those significant places on the landscape. And for me, Pukekura here is one of those significant places on the landscape, and I appreciate the opportunity that was given to myself on behalf of my whānau hapu to acknowledge that as part of this discussion that we're having here on such a fine day. Kia ora koutou, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
A nice gift. Ah, thanks.
No, that's right. So normally a mihi, you would mihi to someone at the beginning, so you're welcoming them, and then what would normally happen in the process is your hongi. So that's an exchange of mauri. So my mauri is the life essence, so the things that all things carry. So that's water has mauri, all bird life, the plant life, all has mauri, and that's something that we share. And I guess the reason that we have a very strong affinity with water is the water that's on the planet here travels around. So the water that we drink today is potentially the same water that was drunk by my ancestors and pass through those, and could have potentially passed through your ancestors, because it all travels up here into the sky and it moves around the planet, drops back down here on my piece of whenua. At one time it was probably potentially touching your piece of whenua. So we see that Māori as the life essence that flows through Papatuanuku, which is the Earth Mother. So when we talk about, I guess, the whenua, we talk about it in that global sense, because the whenua that we're standing on here continues underneath that ocean that's behind us and comes up in Europe, it comes up in America, so we're all linked. So it's important for us to understand that and to appreciate or treasure the life essence that's bound up in that Māori. And I think it's a concept that's carried very well through Indigenous people, but also understood from the smaller groupings that we probably had before we turned into this great cosmopolitan society that we are today. You appreciated having healthy water because it meant that flowed through to healthy people. So a saying that is often heard here is he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. It's about the people, the people, the people. It's because everything at some point travels through those people, and they are the ones that have the biggest impact on the things that are around them.
Okay, just